Today I'm doing a TMNT Cowabunga collection tier list. I beat all these games a while back. I forgot to I can do this because I played them all. No save states or rewind. If you played these games with save states or rewind, you are a pussy bitch and probably don't know what you're talking about when it comes to these games. But me, I played them all legit, beat them all. So I actually have like opinions about them. I'm not a TMNT fan, but obviously these games are really fun because Konami is a great developer, and they'll try to make a game, even if it's like Monster in My Pocket, like a toy no one cares about, right? They'll try to make a good game still. So even though they didn't know what the hell TMNT was in Japan, because it's not a thing there, wasn't gonna stop them from making some awesome games. So I'm sort of like Konami was when they first started. I don't know anything about TMNT. I watched like the early 2000 movie 3D animation. That's about it for me for TMNT. But I'm a fan of, like, to me they're just like it's a video game franchise. Otherwise, I don't know anything. So just remember, this is from someone that's not a fan of this franchise, right? So first we got TMNT Turtles in Time. Now, how could you go wrong with Turtles in Time Arcade? The only reason that I wouldn't put it higher, so it was a great improvement over the original Turtles arcade game. Only reason I wouldn't put it higher is because the Super Nintendo version of this game is just straight up better. So it makes it sort of hard to go back to this one. But, it's still a great game. Obviously, if I see a cabinet of this game at, like, an arcade, of course I'm going to play it. One of the best beat-em-ups ever made, but they did better. Even better with the Super Nintendo version. So that's only why I can only put it this high. But you can't go wrong with Turtles in Time Arcade. I just wouldn't really revisit it very often if I can just play the Super Nintendo version. Now this is Turtles 1 Arcade, so I'm going to put it in C, because it's not quite as good as Turtles in Time, but I will say it might have been the best arcade beat-em-up ever released at the time, right? So like a month after this, they released Final Fight. I just prefer the way this game feels and like how fast it is compared to something like Final Fight. Not that it's a bad thing that Final Fight is slow, it's just like personal preference. Just like the speed of this game feels really good to play. Obviously, the stage design is, for all of the beat-em-ups, pretty much. One of the good things about TMNT is the stage design. They're very varied, and it's a repetitive genre, but that's why stage design is very important. It's how you create variety beyond just different enemies sometimes. TMNT Follow the Foot Clan. So this was 1990 Game Boy released. Probably the best looking Game Boy game ever released at the time. In the first 2 years of the Game Boy lifespan, so it's really impressive looking. I can actually say with confidence it's probably the best looking early Game Boy game in the first 2 years. But that comes with obviously you gotta compensate if a game looks this good. So obviously it's like Super Mario Land, really simplistic looking game, but because of that, they could make Mario actually go pretty fast in comparison. Like Super Mario Land 2, bigger sprites, slower game, but that also has to do with screen size. You can't really see if it's that up close to Mario or he's that big. Basically what I'm saying is that this game is slow, which is unfortunate. Probably my number one problem with this game is how slow it is. It's also very repetitive. Basically, you just have enemies jumping at you constantly. They're just throwing themselves at you like every second. So you just walk forward, kill an enemy, and then that's the entire game. It's fun though. You can't say it's not engaging, and they made it engaging with the constant enemies being thrown at you. Really easy game. Probably the easiest game in this collection. Final boss, I didn't even know what was going on. I just beat him first try. Didn't even get hit. So one of the easiest most pathetic final bosses I've ever seen. But it's a fun time. D might seem low, but like it's not bad, right? These are the bad ones, E and F. TMNT back from the sewers for the Game Boy, the second one. I actually put it this high. I think this is one that people actually consider the worst of the Game Boy games. I really like it. It's actually very unique compared to most games in this collection. There's a big emphasis on platforming. The stages are also good, like the stages allow for platforming. You know, there's stages with a lot of verticality, stages where you just go straight, even like 2.5D stages, which is pretty interesting. Still a slow game, the worst looking of the Game Boy games, and you'll be surprised that this game is significantly larger in size than even Radical Rescue. Now, how could that be? Radical Rescue is a pretty large Metroidvania. Well, they included very high quality voice clips in this game. That is why it has such a big file size. So, pretty interesting that they prioritize that over perhaps other things. But this game's fun. Like, probably. So it's like kind of the perfect difficulty, I would say. You even have like a harder difficulty. At least it's like the perfect difficulty compared to the other Game Boy games. This one's too easy, and this one is the hardest game of this collection. I'm just gonna say it. Radical Rescue is the hardest game of the collection. And that is because of the ridiculous boss rush they throw at you at the end. So they throw every boss at you. You gotta, if you lose, obviously you restart the boss rush, and you gotta get through every boss just to get to Shredder, just to attempt fighting him. Now the bosses in this game are actually well designed, right? But I think it's stupid that like there's such a huge difficulty spike at the end, due to their decision to put that. So that's actually like the majority of my time playing this game by a lot is just fighting the bosses. As far as Metroidvania, this actually predates Symphony of the Night as a Konami Metroidvania game, which is pretty interesting. I don't really think it had much of an influence on Symphony of the Night at all, because it's very bare bones. Like, first of all, this game uses passwords. If you're a Metroidvania, you shouldn't use passwords. Metroid 2, which came out earlier, does not use passwords. So if you're playing this game, like anytime you enter like a new area, you'll probably get a new password. So you're just like constantly keeping track of new passwords, and even if you game over twice, which it doesn't really matter, because if you know like the last number in the password is like how many continues you have, so you can just set it like to 2. But it's really dumb that they would put continues in a Metroidvania game. As I was saying, as far as Metroidvanias go, it's very bare bones. Basically, you rescue the turtles, unlike Samus, who gets upgrades to like progress through the world. In this game, you gotta save a turtle who has one ability that will let you, get into different areas you couldn't before. But there's like no reason to use these turtles like outside of like Leonardo. He sucks. No reason to use him over outside of when you need to progress through the game. Michelangelo and Donatello are easily the most useful turtles with their ability, especially in boss fights, the hover and the climb. What was I talking about? Alright, I just blanked. Basically, alright, so like TMNT on NES, you got like 4 different health bars, right? So even though every turtle sucks compared to Donatello, at least you're gonna switch because, you know, you get to use their health bars. In this game, you're using 1 health bar, which is kind of silly. You should have 4, so you actually would switch to other turtles, right? Mithra is my waifu, is here already. Dude, we got a TMNT game this year, so I'm a little confused about your statement. But anyway, moving on. I think this game is very bare bones Metroidvania, which is stupidly difficult, the hardest game in this collection. Next we got TMNT Tournament Fighter is the worst fighting game I've ever played? Probably not. Street Fighter 1 is probably worse, but this game is pretty similar to Street Fighter 1. So when you play this game, you'll see the art, and you're like, wow, this art is like really good. But then you play it and you notice something's really wrong. And you'll realize the designers did not give a single shit. And basically you'll die in like 2 to 3 hits only. I don't even know if there's combos in this game. Pretty much they don't matter. You get to set your speed and power. I don't know why they decided that. So if you think your character sucks, just like increase their speed and power to 8. I don't know what this design choice was. It's like that was their excuse for not balancing the game at all. Just feels like shit to play, and it sucks, is my opinion on this game. However, if you're me, a pro gamer, you use April, and you do the April blender, there's nothing the opponents can do about it, and you just win for free. So that's what if you want to beat this game, some would say it's the hardest game in the collection. It's not. You just got to pick April and do the thing. But yeah, like the computers are extremely cheap in this game, and it has limited continue, so it's very rage-inducing as well. Hyperstone Heist, really good Genesis game. It is obviously, very similar to Turtles in Time. It's not quite on that level though. First of all, there's only 5 stages. What they do is they extend the length of these stages to make up for it. But one of the stages is just reused boss fights, and that's it. So it really shows that, they had a decent foundation as far as the gameplay. But clearly it's rushed, because there's not actually that much unique content compared to Turtles in Time or even the NES beat-em-ups. So if they had a little more time to actually polish this game and add more content, it would maybe be an A. But compared to Super Nintendo Turtles in Time, Super Nintendo Turtles in Time is using the Super Nintendo's hardware to its fullest. With Mode 7 graphics, it actually improves the game a lot. Konami is very capable of using the Genesis hardware to its fullest. They've done it many times. They did not do it here because you can tell it's just rushed, because they probably had to get it out for the holidays. It's unfortunate. This game could have been really good, but kind of just worse Turtles in Time. So this is an impressive game if you consider it's on the NES. NES is not a console with fighting games. It's very lacking in fighting games. All the fighting games on NES suck. Game Boy, in comparison, has some pretty good fighting games, made by SNK. So this, as far as NES fighting games, one of the best. But as far as fighting games go in general, it's not good. Very simplistic, but pretty impressive for the NES still. Not that they could have made an even better game, because they have good fighting games on the Game Boy. But you can't get too mad at them, because probably at minimum top 2 NES fighting game. So whatever. Still not very good. Turtles on NES. So this is a game everyone hates because they're cheap and listen to AVGN or something. IGN rated this as their worst game in the collection. I don't know what are they even talking about. So here's the thing with this game. This is the highest selling NES game, right? That's not developed by Nintendo. That's a pretty big deal, right? 4 million copies, highest selling non-Nintendo NES game, right? So everyone and their mom has played this game. Extremely popular. So if you're looking at the top 20 best-selling NES games, right? This one is one of the most difficult. Maybe top 2. The only one that I could see being more difficult is Punch-Out, as far as the top 10 or top 20 NES games. Konami in general makes a lot harder games than Nintendo on NES, right? So maybe people aren't used to that. So they kind of they over-exaggerate the difficulty of this game. As far as NES games go, I would say it's very forgiving. You have 4 different health bars. You can farm pizza, right? So they're making it pretty hard to die in this game. Everyone complains about the sewer level. Everyone complains about the underwater level. They're actually really easy, so I don't understand. The only thing that's hard in this game is the final level, which is actually ridiculously difficult. It's the only thing that's actually hard in this game. You just gotta like get past the astronauts. People will suggest, you know, farm the scrolls, right? Scrolls, I advise against it. Do not do that. It's a waste of time. If you die once, they're gone. So like if you spend 30 minutes grinding scrolls and you die, well shit, dude. You're better off just going to the final level, doing your best to survive. Like you play as the 3 turtles that aren't Donatello, and you use them to just get by the enemies, right? That's 3 health bars you got to work with. So just like run past the enemies until like their health bars are really low, and then you switch to a new health bar. And this level actually reveals my 2 biggest problems with this game, right? That's one, Donatello is way better than the other turtles in this game. He's way more useful. His staff is pretty OP. They didn't really balance the turtles at all. He's clearly the best. Like the other turtles in this level can't do shit. That's why people suggest you get the scrolls, because then they can actually kill the enemies. And then 2, my second biggest problem is enemy encounter RNG. So like the enemies that you see is like there's like 2 different or 3 different possibilities for like any screen, and you just gotta hope that you don't run into the astronauts. So if you start this level and you get the astronauts right off the bat, it might be too late for you, which is that's pretty messed up. What was I saying? Right, so like the final boss is extremely easy here. So you just hit him off and then he can't do anything. But basically if you lose Donatello on this level, it's over for you. There's nothing you can do. So that's also a design flaw, right? But overall, I actually consider this game very fun. I played it for like 10 hours straight until I beat it. Because it was fun, I wanted to keep playing it. Anyway, we got TMNT Arcade on NES. So this is just like the this game, right? This game, but made for NES. Obviously, it doesn't have the capabilities of an arcade, so there's less enemies. They can be on screen at a time, you know, not as fast. But you see, Konami compensates by having a little more extra content in this game. So it's actually worth your time. It's not just a worse version of TMNT Arcade. It's its own game that's worth playing. It's just not as good still, despite having more content, just doesn't play as well. But it's still a good game. Manhattan Project. Amazing game, not really, because B, so I would say it's a great game or a good game. So this game, the biggest strength, first of all, no one talks about this game because it's a late NES release. If you go to IGN's top 100 NES games, they don't even have this game on here. They have this game, which is clearly worse. So as far as NES beat 'em ups, this is as good as they could possibly get, in my opinion. One problem with these TMNT games is that the turtles are basically identical when it comes to their gameplay. This game has these super moves, special moves, whatever you want to call them. They really differentiates the turtles. And it's very interesting because if you use them, your health goes down. But if you have 1 health left, you can just start spamming them. Most beat 'em ups don't do that. If you have 1 health, you can't use your special move anymore. So I actually think it's very interesting that they decided to do that here. So it actually makes this game very interesting for speedrunning, because you're essentially, because these special moves just decimate everything, you would essentially be playing the entire game with 1 health, which I think is pretty interesting. Presentation is obviously amazing, just the graphics and music, and I think the gameplay is, you know, second to this game, but we'll get to that. But like this game does the best at making the turtles feel different from each other. Most of the beat 'em ups, pretty much all of them, actually don't do that. TMNT Tournament Fighters Super Nintendo. So I played these 2. They were abysmal, right? So you'd be surprised that this game is actually great. One of the best 16-bit beat 'em ups I've ever played in my life. They even still do tournaments for this game to this day. There's still active players, and you wouldn't even know, like, that this game is like, if you saw it, you would think maybe it's an arcade game, but it's a Super Nintendo game. And I actually think that benefits it because I do think the Super Nintendo sound chip sounds a lot better than arcade. But the game, so compared to this game, like, you don't even use the turtles' weapons, which is really weird. So this game actually does that, where the turtles' weapons actually matters. So it gives you some varied play styles, which is good. It's just a like well-designed fighting game with amazing presentation. Really fun. I don't really have anything else to say about it. I would put it number 2 game in this collection. The only 16-bit beat 'em up, fighting game I would say is probably better is Street Fighter 2: The New Challengers that I've played so far. But I actually prefer this over every fighting game I've played on Super Nintendo besides that one. Of course, I'm a casual player. Most of Street Fighter 2 tryhards will not say that The New Challengers is the best one. But from a casual perspective, it's my favorite. And from a casual perspective, I really like this game. Anyway, we got Turtles in Time Super Nintendo. One of the GOAT video games. Considered one of the best video games of all time. Also considered the best beat 'em up of all time, even to this day. I would say it's still better than Shredder's Revenge that came out this year. And that's because it's a brilliant game. So first of all, it's obviously based off the arcade arcade Turtles in Time. So they could have just like, used only the content from this game. What they do is actually they add more content and improve the gameplay. So one of the interesting things, in the arcade game, you throw enemies at the camera towards the player. So it's a cool little effect, but it doesn't really matter. In this game, it's a meaningful gameplay mechanic, and it has one of the most creative bosses I've ever seen, where you're, seeing it from Shredder's perspective, and you throw the enemies at him, which is brilliant. That's just like the sort of thing you'd expect to see in this game. It's just an improvement. Level design is varied and memorable. Plays great, looks great, and I was gonna say something else. What was it? Oh yeah, like this game uses the Super Nintendo's hardware to its absolute fullest, in my opinion, with the Mode 7 graphics. Obviously, you got the turtles, being thrown at the player, which isn't in this game, because maybe they can't do it on Genesis. I don't know. But then you also get Mode 7 graphics levels, which I think is really cool. That doesn't actually exist in the arcade game. I think it improves the game with this addition. But yeah, I would say one of the most brilliant beat 'em ups ever made, and best game of this collection. You can't go wrong with it. I actually don't really have complaints other than the turtles play a little too similarly to each other. Like, I think this game is the best when it comes to making the turtles feel different from one another. But overall, this is the better game. It just does everything else better, in my opinion. So that's about it for the TMNT Cowabunga collection. That is my tier list. I believe this reflects my actual opinion. If I was IGN, I'd put this like down here, but I'm not IGN. I actually played these games, and yeah.